Welcome back to Joy TCG, where it's Final Fantasy TCG all the time. Today, I'm going to do a deck tech of my favorite deck currently, which is Turks. And you might say, oh, well, Ice Lightning has a lot of other options available. And yes, it does. And if you've looked at all the current tournament meta, the Ice Lightning is all discard based, which I don't like. Discard is boring. And so I thought that it'd be fun to try to build something around Turks. The hard thing about Turks is they don't have any EX bursts. So, except for this Rufus. So what I did is I tried to build as many EXs into this deck as possible to try to make up for that shortcoming, and it seems to work out so far very well. So you've got the standard Turk setup, which is these 6 cards across the top. So that's 18 cards. You need all of them. They're amazing. If you don't know how the Turks work, essentially, once you have 4 Turks on the field, Rude and Reno have some fantastic abilities. Reno gives all your Turks haste if you have 4 or more Turks on the field at the beginning of your attack phase, and Rude dulls all your opponent's forwards if you have 4 or more Turks on the field at the beginning of your attack phase. So that's the key to this deck. I have found that you can put 4 Turks on the field in 1 turn, and that is a game-winning move most of the time because people are not ready for it. And it doesn't always work, but that is the goal. So, other pieces of this deck that have been very beneficial, we've got old Rufus here. So the new Rufus card that's multi-element is way too situational. It doesn't have any X burst, and it requires you to pay 4 to bring him to the field, and then another 6 to use his action ability, which is also only active at damage 5. So there's just way too many hurdles to jump through to really make that work. This Rufus is so much better. He's the same cost at 4, although he's not dual element. He has an EX, and when he comes to the field, you grab a Turk, search Turk, and put it in your hand. And when a job member of the Turk is put from the field to the break zone, or Rufus, then you choose an active forward the opponent controls it and deal it 5,000 damage. That's a little bit situational because they may not have an active forward, so it doesn't do you any good, but it's better than nothing, which is what the other Rufus does. So this guy is, to me, way better. We've got Aerith, 1 copy of Aerith. This is just a card that gets you 2 cards back out of the break zone. Almost most of this deck is category 7, and the cards that you care about are all 7, which is all the Turks. So I just run 1 copy of Aerith in case it's just a value card, and her action ability is really the key to making her good, which is turn, break, pay 1, and protect a category 7 from being broken. Another key to this deck that makes it fantastic is Al-Cid. If you don't already have Al-Cid, I'm sorry, because they're super expensive for some reason. I was fortunate enough to find them when the packs came out, and at the time he just went in my binder, and I went, I don't know any use for this card. Well, now I see one. He is fantastic and amazing, and I could never build this deck without him. It's, when he comes to the field, play an Ice or Lightning forward of 4 or less from your hand onto the field, which is any forward I have except Aerith and Noel. And his other ability is anytime a Ice forward comes to the field, freeze one of your opponent's forwards. And anytime a Lightning forward attacks, dull one of your opponent's forwards. As you see, I've got mostly Lightning forwards, so I'm getting the dulls in quite often. The freezes are less common, but they can be very effective. The other piece that's important to this deck, well, there's a couple of them, but we got Sephiroth. I only run 2 copies of Sephiroth for the simple reason of I only own 2 Sephiroths. If I had 3, I would probably put in a 3rd Sephiroth instead of Noel, but I do like his EX. Sephiroth is back attack, choose a dull forward, break it. It's just so good. And then on top of that, he's an annoyance that your opponent has to pay attention to, because if you let him stay on the field and he continues to attack, I can break a 2 cost each turn when he attacks, or make them discard a card. So either way, I'm getting value out of Sephiroth. And then we got Zeramus, another card that shot up in price recently, surprisingly. Zeramus is, when he comes to the field or attacks, choose a character and freeze it. This is even more valuable than Al-Cid, and you may say, why is that? Well, this is character instead of forward. He has to choose a forward. Zeramus gets to choose a character. And choosing a character is so valuable, especially early game, when you can freeze one of their backups. If it's first turn, second turn, and they've only got 1 or 2 backups on the field, it shuts down their next play, and they have to discard an extra card, which is like, okay, no big deal. But the reason it's so important in this deck is all about speed. It's possible, if you play the cards right and you happen to get the perfect draw, if you go second and you get 7 cards in hand, you can get 4 Turks on the field first turn, and one of them can be Reno. If you do that, you can attack with 4 Turks on turn 1. And I did it once, and it wasn't super effective because he hit 2 EX bursts and killed 2 of my Turks. But it was still funny, and that's the whole point of playing the game. So it's possible to win on turn 2 if you're extremely lucky and hit the right build. Now, back to Zeramus, his other effect is at the end of each of your turns, dole all the forwards opponent controls. So that's another effect that's forcing your opponent to choose him. So we've got Zeramus, Sephiroth, and Al-Cid that all have ongoing benefit that your opponent's like, ooh, I don't want to leave that on the field. And the purpose of that is really, most importantly, for them to avoid the Turks, because that's how you win the game. If they are forced to deal with these 3 cards and ignore the Turks, you're going to probably win. And if they choose to ignore these, you may win because of their other effects, but your Turks might lose out. And that's okay too. We've got this 1 copy of Noel. This is in here because I kind of just ran out of options and I really wanted an EX burst that might help me. So his EX burst is choose up to 2 forwards opponent controls and dole them. Never a bad thing. And if you've already got a freeze on them due to Al-Cid or Zeramus and they weren't already dole for some reason, which can happen, now Noel's hitting them for that extra dole. So now they're dole and froze. And then his other action ability, if you actually play him to the field, which I haven't yet, but I mean, it could, it's put Noel in the break zone, dole all the forwards opponent controls. So this is an action ability that doesn't say during your turn. You could activate this on your opponent's turn, dole all his forwards. He's in big trouble. He couldn't attack that turn, and then he's wide open to your attacks next turn. So onto the backup line, we've got Tella. This Tella, I had some people go, what? There's a Tella in Opus 13? Oh, yes, there is. So this Tella I really like because it's choose a summon in your break zone, add it to your hand. That's a simple, straightforward effect. But as you see my summons, I only have 2 types of summons, and they're both cost 5. Well, that's important because Tella's other ability is discard a summon. Dole Tella, put him in the break zone, choose a dole forward, deal it 1 or 3,000 damage for each CP required to cast that summon. So the only 2 summons I can discard are Shiva and Odin, both of 5 cost. So if I use Tella's action ability, I'll be hitting something for 15,000. And that's pretty much a guaranteed kill on anything, which is very helpful occasionally. President Shinra is part of the Turks build. If you don't run President Shinra, you're crazy. He's so good. When he comes to the field, and it's an EX burst, choose a card named Rufus or a Turk and add it to your hand. Now you may think, well, okay, I'm always going to choose a Turk. Well, because of this Rufus, I've actually used this to search Rufus occasionally if I already have Sing in hand. Another card I found very valuable is this Celis, especially early game. So Celis, this is similar to what I was talking about with Zeramus. When Celis enters the field, choose up to 2 backups opponent controls and freeze them. It's very likely that your opponent on turn 1 or 2 will have 1 or 2 backups. And if they do have 1 or 2 doled backups already, this Celis gets to freeze them. I have won a game because of Celis. Turn 2, they had 2 dole backups because they just played 1 first turn, played another 1 second turn. And that was all they had on the field. Froze both of them. And then they brought a forward out because, well, they didn't have anything else to do. And I already had 3 forwards on the field. And then they hit me with that forward and hit an EX burst. Guess what? It was Celis the next turn. And so I got to dole freeze their backups 2 turns in a row, and they were done. There was no way they were recovering at that point because Turks were too fast. So Celis and Zeramus are absolute devastating when they hit, early game because you can pretty much win turn 2, turn 3, sometimes turn 4. Cid of Clan Gully is in here just because he has an EX burst. I'm almost never going to actually play this card, but get a lightning character out of your break zone and add it to your hand. That's pretty much grab a Turk or grab an Al-Cid or a Zeramus, and you're ready next turn to hit them hard. Same thing with Ideolus. This one is a ice character, so I usually use it to grab Zeramus, Al-Cid, or Sephiroth, but actually I almost half the time I end up grabbing Legendary Turk with this because I just need a Turk, and he's a 2 cost, and I can just throw him on the field real quick. And then we've got the final piece of this, which is the summons. Both of these are the Opus 13 summons that are reduced by 3 when you have damage 5. So I've occasionally cast them at damage 5, but usually I hope to hit them on an EX, and so it will either remove something off the field or dull freeze 2 of their forwards. So this is my Turks build. Let me know what you think.